All right, so we have our image in here. First thing I'm gonna do is I want to just make 2 copies of this. I want to have the original image in case I do something destructive, and I'll have something that's not. So I'm just gonna double click on the actual name here. Try that again. There we go. And we'll just call it original. Great. And then with this selected, I'm gonna hit Control J or Command J, which will make a duplicate of it. I'm gonna double click on that name and we'll call this edited. All right, so that'll be my edited one. I'm gonna take the original, I'm gonna lock it to make sure I don't accidentally do anything. I'm also gonna turn it off. The reason why I turn it off is that way if I were to erase it, you could see, or if I make a mistake, see I could see behind it that this is messed up. If this is on, I wouldn't be able to tell. So it's a good idea to actually turn it off as well. So I'm gonna leave that off. Good, okay. So now we have that. The next thing I want to do is I can erase this, right? And I can draw over top of it. I can do all these destructive edits to it. One of the goals of this assignment, and really should be your goal for most projects if possible, is we want to make non-destructive edits, which means that the original image is safe. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to right click over top of this and we're going to go convert to smart object. And you can see that little symbols on there. That means it's a smart object. Notice that now I have a no smoking sign. Okay. So I cannot do any destructive edits to this. I can do things that are non-destructive, such as like scaling it. That won't be destructive because it's not actually resampling it because it is the original image. So notice it looks fine. I'm just going to undo that anyway just to make sure it's the right scale. So that looks good. All right, we made that smart object. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and let's just crop this like it's hot. So go up to the crop tool. I'm going to go width height resolution 6IN by 9IN by 300 ppi, right? So this is portrait. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it as portrait. But I'm just going to pull in a little bit. You see it's a little bit wider than I would normally want. So typically what we want to do is pull in on your subject material as much as possible. So we'll call it like that. That looks good. And I will hit enter. Okay. Actually, let's undo that real quick. Just want to show you something. So let's do this again. I'm going to do another thing too. Oh, actually, I don't think it will matter, will it? Let me move this out of the way. Okay, it's already there. One thing to keep in mind when you are doing this. So typically I don't want to put things right in the center, but because we're trying to make something that's more subject based, we're going to go ahead and put that there. There is this option for delete crop pixels. If you do the crop tool and you do delete crop pixels, it actually deletes all this extra image on the outside once it crops it. By default, I would just leave that off so that way you don't lose anything in case you do need to move this around. So you can see when I do it now and I move this, see how there's extra image back there? If I did crop pixels, there wouldn't be extra image. Although this is a smart object, so maybe it would still be there. But by default, just leave that off. Okay. Normally what I like to do is kind of work broad to specific. So I'm going to try and just real broadly make some adjustments to this. And the easiest way to do that is the adjustment layers. So there's a couple different ways to go about doing it. Probably you can go down here and this gives you all of the adjustment layers. But if you also go to adjustments up here, you'll see that there are a whole, they are all here. Actually, they have all of them up here now. Okay. They used to not have all of them up here. I believe this is all or most of them. Let me see. Is solid in there? No, it's still missing some, but it has a lot of them. There's also this neat little area that's new where they have these adjustment presets. And what's cool about them, if I go, you can see I have ones for portraits, landscapes. So if I do portraits, for instance, if you hover over them, it actually shows you what they look like. And all these are, don't use these because it's cheating. But all these are is, let's do some of, it's real. These all look kind of lame, but some of them are very cool. All these are, it's like that looks kind of cool, is a collection of just pre-made adjustment layers. So watch, when I click on it, you're going to see it makes a whole bunch of adjustment layers. But I want you to do these manually yourself. So it just puts them on a folder, okay? But it's kind of a neat thing. Group and contents. Okay. So we're not going to use the presets. We're going to stick down to these ones here. But I want to make some general adjustments. Usually, now you're going to find your own process that you like to work with. Typically, what I like to do is work on the lightness, darkness, and then I work on color. So I'm going to go ahead and use levels. Now, unlike the other one where we went up here and we did image adjustments, right? That permanently changed them. This will make a layer, an adjustment layer above it with a mask. We'll talk about masks more in depth later. And then I can make these adjustments. So right here, I can go ahead and a lot of times I'll try to click auto, see what results that gives me, but it's actually kind of worse, right? Which is kind of surprising. Usually it does a pretty good job, but the last couple times I've been using this hasn't been so good. So see it's flatlined here. So I might just go ahead and take this white and just bring it over this way. As long as I'm not losing too much information. I'm losing a little bit there, but I'm just going to pull it a little bit until I feel like I'm losing too much. So we'll say right about there. Okay. So just, I'll turn it off and turn it on. See how it just kind of brightens it overall. And then I'll take the black, and then I'm just going to go this way with it. Now, it is making it a little bit dark, so I'm going to go a little bit. I really don't care about this. I'm going to remove that anyway. So I'm just going to pull this in a little bit. We'll say like that, okay? And that looks good. Okay, now I'm just going to click off. You'll see that that is no longer in the properties panel, but if I ever want to adjust it again, I can just click on it, and I can always remake those adjustments. I can turn off that adjustment. That's what makes this so nice, having these as non-destructive. So if for some reason you do something and later on you do something else and you don't like the old thing, you can always remove it or make adjustments if someone wants you to. Let's go ahead and let's do vibrance. So I'm going to take vibrance, and I usually like to do this. I'm just going to take vibrance, and I'm just going to up that. And you can see the problem I'm having with it is this. Notice that it's making this a little more vibrant, which I like, but I don't like how this is getting vibrant. If you were to squint your eyes, you'll notice that this is kind of the most saturated. And although I like the wood grain, I don't like how much it's overpowering. It's ascending. Well, it's making this descend because this is a more neutral tone, and this is actually more saturated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I'm just actually going to trash it. Okay. I'm going to go back to this layer here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and select just my guy, and then we will make adjustments to just him. So we're going to get more into how to select things more properly, but for now, I'm just going to go to here, and we're just going to use object selection, and I'm going to click and drag over my dude, and it should hopefully do a good job, and it did mostly good. It's not 100%, but that's fine. You can see right here, it's got a little bit of something extra, but I'm just going to live with it for now, just because I don't want to. We'll get more into depth with it later, but I mostly have him selected. So now with that selected on that layer, I'm just going to go ahead and go to adjustments, and now I'm going to do vibrance, and you're going to see it's slightly different, but notice that everything's black except for where this is white. So that means it's only going to affect here. And I'm going to up that vibrance, and notice that he's getting a lot more vibrant. Pretty nice, okay? So I'm just going to up that a little bit, so now he's a little more saturated. Now I want to do the opposite. So I'm going to click back on this. Make sure you always click on this, because if you're on this one and you do something, you're not doing it on this one. So now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to, actually, I'm going to let that, yeah. If you'll notice that, so I have nothing, so I hit Control D to have nothing selected, or Command D if you're on a Mac. But notice that if you hover, it also, instead of clicking and dragging like I did the first time, you can also do it by just hovering over, and it will automatically, it's only doing these two, it'll automatically grab them. So in this case, actually, I was gonna, it actually is grabbing it pretty well, but it is missing this little bit there. Well, we'll just do it this way. So I'm just gonna click on this. If for some reason this doesn't work, it's not selecting your background because you have a little bit more, what you could do is do the same thing we just did. Click on him, and then I'm gonna invert my selection. So now what I'm gonna do is go to select and go invert, or you can hit Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I. And now I have everything selected but him, okay? And I'm just going to do the same tool. I'm going to go Adjustments. I'm going to go Vibrance. I'm going to take the Vibrance, and this time I'm going to go down a little bit. So notice that we took basically away the saturation of this. So that's with it on, and that's with it off. Now, you might be like, oh, it looks nicer with it off. And I would agree this is a nice color, but it's not highlighting my guy as well. I'm going to go back to this one and maybe just up this all the way so it's even more vibrant, okay? That looks pretty okay. The next thing I want to do, and we might make some more adjustments as well, is I want to kind of remove this background. So to do that, I'm going to use another adjustment layer. It's the weirdest, dumbest one, and it's not normally how I do it, but this is what we're going over today, so I'm just going to show you. I'm going to try and select this area and make an adjustment onto that. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool. So you might have lasso, polygonal's this one. Now, depending on what you're doing, you might need to grab it a different way. I'm going to use the polygonal because I just have this little bit here. Hopefully, if I had photoed it a little bit better and you didn't have this, that would be even better, but we'll just work with what we got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click roughly, I'm going to Control++, I'm going to hold spacebar. Control+, hold spacebar. Okay. And I'm going to try and go across this edge here. So I'm actually going to go right here to here, and then we'll click up, over, and then I'm just going to, we'll click here, and then you'll see it turns a little circle there next to it. Let's turn circle, click, and now this is what's being selected, which means any adjustment now that I make is only going to affect this area. Okay. We're going to go to adjustments, and then you'll see, okay, so this doesn't have all the ones in there, right? It has a lot of them, most of the ones you would normally use, but if you click on this, this gives you all of them. See the one that says solid color? That's the one I'm going to use. Gradient wouldn't be bad either. It'd probably be even better, but I'm going to be lazy. We're just going to do solid color. Oh, actually, before I do that, I'll do it real quick, but you're doing your thing. See how it's kind of, well, it's making a solid color, but see how it's a hard line? I actually want that to be a little bit blurry. So what I'm going to do is with this selection, I'm going to go to select, and we can make adjustments to our selection. I'm going to go modify, and you'll see right here is feather. So I'm going to take feather, and let's feather it, let's say, actually, I want it to, we're going to expand it a little bit too. So I'm going to go to select, because right now I did it right on this edge. I want to feather it, but I want to go past this edge just a little bit, so that way it blends into it. So I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to choose expand, and let's expand it by, let's say, 12 pixels. So you're going to see it's going to go a little bit farther down by 12 pixels. And now I'm going to do feather, select, modify, and I'm going to choose feather, and I'm going to do 25. So that way it splits the difference is what I'm thinking. All right, so now that is feathered. Just so you get the idea, like if I were to, oops, I'm not even on the right layer. Actually, I can't delete it because it's a smart object. I was going to delete so you can see it, but when I go to do this effect, you'll see it'll work better now. So I'll click on this. I'm going to go ahead and choose solid color, and now you see how it's feathered on that edge. And for this color, I'm going to sample, let's say, this shadow, and use that. Right? If you use colors that are within the image already, it'll make it much more harmonious because it'll exist here and here. I could also try to grab some of these blues here, but anything I grab in the image is naturally going to match what's there. It's going to become more unified. But I'm going to choose this shadowy dark area as mine, okay? And maybe even make it just a touch darker, like that, okay? And then we'll hit okay. All right, so now that's black and it's not kind of interfering with what I have. Okay, so we've made some adjustments. The next thing I want to do is I would like to kind of have my focus more on him. Now you'll notice that the camera itself did do some blur here. See how there's a bit of blur here? You don't see it so much up here. But I want to basically blur everything up here and down here, but focus on this. I'm going to select this. Now this effect will work no matter what, but because it's a smart object, you're going to see it's going to work a little bit differently. So I'm going to have this selected. I'm going to go to filter, and then you'll see blur. There's a bunch of blurs here, which are cool. But I'm going to go to blur gallery. Now I highly suggest just playing around with these. I don't want to go through all of them just because maybe we will in class. Just because it depends on your situation and what you're trying to do. Some of them might work better than other ones. In my case, I'm going to use the tilt shift one. Okay. And what it's going to do is it creates these this line here. Now watch. I'm going to take this. This is where it's going to stay sharp until. So from here to here, it will be sharp. Okay. I'm going to take this is my blur slider. Now I'm going to just drive it all the way up so you can see. And let's try that again. So you can see it's going to make it completely blurry. See how blurry that is? Now this second line, this one here, this is basically the feathering. So when it goes past this line, this is when it's 100% blurry. So I'm going to take this and we're going to go to, let's say, there. Now this one, I'm going to go, I'm going to bring it way down because I want to see how now it's less blurry there. I'm going to control minus. I want to have it more gentle. Let's go a little bit farther. I don't want to get too blurry too early. If I take this, I can't even see anymore. Control minus, there it is. So you'll see how it gets blurry right there. So I'm just going to bring it way far down so that it doesn't blur too early. This one I need to blur much more early because it goes right off. Okay. And I don't think I need quite that much. I'm going to bring it down. I was just showing you for illustrative purposes. Let's go back up a little. Something like that. See, now I'm going to bring this up now because now it's not so extreme. That's a little bit. I just wanted to start to blur. Then when we're happy and we know it, we clap our hands. There's some other options here as well. So there's an iris one, which you might find this works better for you. So it's kind of the same concept where I could expand this, and then this will change the shape to square or not. And I can also, which way is this one? I can also, this is how much it's feathered past it. I'm going to leave mine on, I'm going to turn that one back off because I don't need that. I'm just going to leave it on the other one, but you might find that the iris one might work better for you. There's also field blur and the other one, okay? But you can also choose those options from earlier. But I find that that one worked better, and then I'll hit okay. Great. Okay, That looks pretty acceptable. Now, what I highly suggest is just playing around with, a bunch of these. You can try to do your different selections here if you're trying to grab something specifically. You could even go to, so blur is good, right? You might want to sharpen this. So I could select this, and let's just do it. It doesn't work super great, but I can go to sharpen. Most of these other ones aren't going to be super useful to you because it's like they'll warp the picture or they'll add noise. You probably don't want to add noise to it or pixelate. These are going to be kind of like if you're trying to stylize it. That's not what we're going for right now. For the most part, you're going to want to either use these blur ones or the sharpen one. So I'm going to do smart sharpen. And what that's going to allow, there's a preview here because it's kind of hard to tell here when you're doing it. Let's go. It's actually best if you do it like, so I have this like the fuzzy area. If I up the radius, you'll see that it'll start to sharpen it a little bit more. And you can kind of see it here, but see, it's getting too much. See how it's getting noisy? So you can try to use the reduce noise. And it kind of helped a little bit in the shadow in particular. But most of the time I find that, because right in here, it's just very, it's getting a little, let's just lower the radius so it requires a little bit more. So you could sharpen a little bit as well. Now the nice thing is, if for some reason you don't like an effect that you're doing, like these ones obviously you can turn on, I can also select them, and then if I go to properties, I can change them still. For these, you see they're a little bit different. You can select them here, but notice that it's not really working. You can turn them off here, and that's not as obvious. Let's do the blur one. Come on. If I turn this off, you can see I can turn off those effects. See, it went away. You can also, give it a second. I could write and delete that specific one, and we can turn them all off by clicking on the mask here. But if for some reason, now notice blur gallery, I don't have this option, but see this little symbol here? If I double click on that, it'll bring back up the options. And sometimes they give you, so I could do opacity on it. So that's the most it's giving me as far as options. Sometimes it'll give you more options. Sometimes it won't give you very many. This one didn't give me a particular lot. So, oh, there we go. So I just clicked on the object there. So now I can do the adjustments. All right. All right. So that looks acceptable, we'll say. Feel free to, do more or less, preferably not less. And then once you're happy, what we're going to want to do is save this, and I will cover that in the next video. But try out the different blurs, okay, in the blur gallery. Just find the one that works best for you in order to blur things if you need to. And try out the different options here as well.